We like to think about things in simple ways, cookie cutter ways at times, and that works for us, and unfortunately in many cases it works against us. We want to simplify things, we want to make things be more palatable, more comprehensible from the get-go, from the start, and that is not usually the case. Especially now, we're living at a time period where things are not what they seem. Or, at the very least, things are not how we would like them to be. So that is what oftentimes creates tension in the mind of the individual. Now, this question has to deal with the receiving of proper instruction. In this case, the instruction referred to is, what is the proper instruction that was given by the Buddha? Is there such a clear-cut method that takes us straight to that state of liberation that was attained by the Buddha and countless others, about whom we read in the suttas, whose lives we encounter in the discourses, the events, the circumstances, etc. Is there currently, and that is the key within the question itself, the key factor, are there teachers today that are teaching that, where I can go and pick it up, where I can go and do what is necessary for me to do and be guided by them? That's the question, essentially. The short answer is yes. But I wouldn't say there's a catch, but it's a lot more complicated. The teaching is always there, so long as there is the Dhamma. You've heard me mention this many times, not just myself, but others as well. The suttas, if we have them, the discourses, we also have the teachings there within them, the method. But it's essential to find a teacher, at least for some portion of your upbringing, spiritual upbringing, to protect you, to protect you from your own old patterns of thinking, from your expectations, from your own plans and ideas and perceptions about what the path is supposed to be. Most of us do not sit down and look carefully in a scrutinizing way, trying to probe and understand our own individual motives. We think simply because we have the desire, that should suffice, that should do it, because it's only a matter of me, booking a flight to somewhere in Asia, getting on a plane, a long haul flight to, let's say, Sri Lanka or Thailand or Myanmar or Burma or somewhere in the world where there's a teacher, or there are teachers with their arms wide open saying, "Come, come, I will guide you." So it's only a matter of me, the person, having to take the tough decision, which is, by the way, very difficult, yes. I'm not going to minimize the importance of the giving up. The Buddha mentions this so many times. where the individual gives up sometimes a small group of friends, small group of ties, small amount of wealth, but other times they give up a big chunk of life, a big chunk of the connections they have, the rootedness that they had worked on throughout life. But they give up all that in order for them to go find that path that leads them to freedom, which is quite beautiful. It takes so much. So you have countless, at least in terms of Westerners, myself being a Westerner, when I look at the amount of individuals who have relinquished and gone to Asia, I think it's fair to say they're countless. So there's a lot of sacrifice involved in that, of course, it goes without saying. However, and this is not just about Westerners, of course. Individuals, let's say somebody from Singapore decides to, or Malaysia, or from Sri Lanka, or Cambodia, or Thailand, decides to, I want to practice, I want to be on the path to awakening. Let me give up the householders, the layman's clothing, and go forth, pabbaja, and walk into homelessness, go ahead. That is tremendous for the individual to do, men and women. Now, unfortunately, this is where it gets complicated, right? I was mentioning, the individual thinks that it is ready, it's there. This was the biggest, heaviest part of the decision-making process. The task, the most challenging part was this. And as I said, for all intents and purposes, this is a big challenge. But it's only one step in the right direction. What is to follow, in many cases, will become a reality check for the individual who has taken such a giant leap, because it's a leap, it requires tremendous trust. But many people fall on their faces when they realize it was not as flowery, as lovely, as easy to kind of blend in, to find, to locate a teacher, to locate a lineage, to find and to settle in to a path, to a tradition, to a monastery, to find that person who will guide them. If they do, that is quite remarkably beautiful. And that says a lot. That says a lot about the kamma of all those involved, the intentions, and especially the kamma, especially of the student, of course. So, in many cases, so many individuals become disappointed. We go looking for the situations or circumstances that we witness happening at the time of the Buddha. We forget that those events that were recorded in the form of suttas or discourses, they are the very, very few out of so much other mundane and adhammic moments, situations and events that were contrary to the Dhamma taking place. But the masters, the teachers, the early disciples wanted to extract the highlights, in a sense. of those encounters between the Buddha and the students, and to bring that, to keep that for posterity, to have that resonate throughout the centuries, to carry the Dhamma to us. And that is why I said, my short answer is yes, we do have it. Now, where do we go looking for it? That's the big deal, because we are dealing still with human beings who have propensities, who have drives, who have desires, who have, well, all of the above. So to look at the student's own intention and sacrifice, of course, by giving up everything to don the robes and dedicate the foreseeable future or their life to this, is only one part of the puzzle. There still needs to be more elements. For that, one has to not just have trust, kindness, compassion, metta, deliberate, intentional, dedicated, appamada, that fervent heedfulness within, but trust also. But trust, not blind trust. This is where a lot of people have fallen into the wrong path by following the wrong teachers. Because the individual thinks, oh, I'm leaving my family in the Netherlands or the UK or in the US, and I'm leaving everything behind and I'm sacrificing. So there is Nibbana waiting for me. That does not happen. There's other factors that involve the growth of the individual. That doesn't mean that the person is not therefore developing by taking those steps even in the wrong direction. So long as their heart is pure with the intention to attain freedom from suffering, they are maintaining humility and trust, but not at the cost of their rational thinking. The critical thinking has to be there. Reasonable thinking has to be there. Their reason has to be there. And of course, integrity and principled lifestyle, which has to come from a place of solid discipline in the precepts. Not just in oneself, but also to see it within the body, the behavior of the teacher to be. So here is where even the Buddha mentions this many, many times. One of them is from the Majjhima Nikaya, the Vimamsaka Sutta, which I've mentioned so many times. The investigation discourse, where he is encouraging the student to have a certain criteria to look for in a teacher. So that cannot be omitted. That has to be there. So there are several steps involved. So it is never just you giving up on a lay life and then everything else is, smooth sailing from then on. No. That was a very big deal, yes. But it's only one aspect, one facet of the journey. Crucial aspect. So the others have to be there. But you are still carrying the responsibility. This is your freedom we're talking about. So you have to be not relinquishing your rational thinking. But at the same time, not equate that with conceit. This is important, where many people falter and fail. Because they attach their conceit to whatever state they're in. Even the robes. The robes can become a source for such a person. some type of a grounding for them to attach themselves to, some type of identifying trait that they can hold on to, they can speak to others about, advertise, and make it into something that it is not meant for. Similarly with the type of teacher. Oh, I'm so-and-so's teacher. My teacher is so-and-so. Oh, I've studied with these teachers. What is that? What's taking place there? You're far away from humility. You're far away from actual practicing. Something, somewhere, went wrong. And you had everything to do with it. The person. So the initial humility, or at least the intentionality, the gesture, the compass, the direction of walking away from home life into homelessness somehow got sullied, got stained by other things that naturally come up for some people. Again, depending on their proclivities, their own sankharas, their own tendencies, habitual tendencies and drives. So the Dhamma itself becomes now a bog. It becomes quicksand for such individuals. So the person doesn't come out, and they might spend 60 years there and die in robes. But no growth has happened. So it's a shift now. It's a shift between living a life in a Western country, in a Western culture, that you've given up, and then you go and all of a sudden you're in the Eastern culture or Asian culture, and even had to learn, let's say, another language. Like in Thailand, you have to learn Thai to communicate as a bhikkhu, as a monk, to survive in it, essentially. That's not necessarily the case in Sri Lanka and other places, but it's always a good thing to speak the local language, of course. That goes without saying. However, the cultural elements come in and all that, so you become a different persona. And that itself, for so many, becomes the end. And it's a trap. So they can get caught in that clique, that they can get caught in that so-called tradition, that world. And because there's others like you who have done the same journey pretty much, who are going through these motions, these rites and rituals, you can say. And then there's a sense of belonging that comes in. And now you feel good about that. Well, this is one of the best tools that Mara uses to trap individuals who were destined to use the best of this life, which is a human body, to break free and cross over to the other side and become arahants. But you won't become an arahant so long as you're still stuck there in the bog. So this is one of the things that happens. The other one is what people have been going through in this, starting from the, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, hippie age, 70s, with all the gurus and all that, who came in to make use of and abuse the trust and faith that individuals had towards this new thing that was coming in their direction. And they knew there was dissatisfaction in them. But they had read so much about this in that tradition, like, in Buddhism, this, okay, let's explore, let's go. And then there's the other group that gets disillusioned from this, all of this, the cult-like movements, this and that, and the blind following, because they cannot find a living embodiment of the teachings within the teacher, the community, etc. Or They see that their own personas, their own characteristics, they don't go well hand in hand with whatever it is that they're surrounded by, and then they quit. They disrobe. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years, sometimes it might take decades, and the person leaves. It's just a matter of coming face to face with certain set of circumstances or situations that they cannot go on lying to themselves and to others. That's not the path, obviously. But these are things I'm pointing out. These are some of the things, by the way. These are not the whole story. But it requires perseverance, resiliency in the individual to keep looking, to keep probing, to keep continuing along the same momentum that started them on the journey to walk away from home life into homelessness. So don't expect simply because you, quote unquote, went forth, that everything is just going to fall into place. No, in many cases, you will be confronted by worse situations than any that you've imagined or had to face prior to wearing the robes. Some of us can attest to that reality and how difficult that can be. But the Dhamma is still there, okay? Without delving too much into that arena of mundane circumstances that can drive a person away or discourage them at least, I just want to briefly mention about the expectations I said. About the Dhamma, how the Dhamma has to be delivered, has to be coming in, has to have the shape of, in order for it to be true Dhamma for you. Leave the door open. Leave a crack in the window of your understanding. Because when you least expect, if your heart is still in the same direction as where it's supposed to be, you will taste more and more purity taking place. And for that, you need the whole combination of the 7 bojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening: sati, dhammavichaya, virya, piti, passaddhi, samadhi, upekkha. You need to have also the 5 spiritual faculties: faith, saddha. You have to have virya, the energy, the effort to apply. You have to feed it with fuel in order to maintain sati, which is mindfulness, which is the 3rd of the 5 faculties. Then it develops into samadhi, the collected stability of the mind. You drop into serenity. And from there, you have the experience of panya taking place, wisdom, discernment. You have all these working, do not fret. You're on the path. But please do not rush yourself by saying you're doing something wrong. Obviously I'm doing something wrong because it hasn't happened yet. No. That's another weapon that Mara uses to discourage you, to not just discourage you, but to make you lose faith entirely. So the real practitioner has to burn the bridges behind them and cross. Come rain or shine, whatever happens, I'm doing this. The only way I'm getting out of here is as a dead arahant. That is the attitude that can carry the person to the Dhamma. Even it shouldn't take that long, by the way. If you're practicing this, if you hear this, if you're applying these methods, you're going to identify the teaching. You're going to see it. Whether there is a teacher or in physical form, flesh and blood there somewhere, looking back at you with their own fleshy eyes, or not? Because your heart will recognize the Dhamma. That's why, whether there are Buddhas or not, so long as there is the dispensation available, you will have arahants. You will have perfectly awakened individuals. So do not give up. Having walked away from lay life is the first step. A big step. A big, huge step. For some of us more so than others. But it is nevertheless all the time difficult, challenging step. But it's only one portion of the recipe. So keep your heart open. Keep your mind open. Keep your intention sharp. Keep your reasoning mind, critical thinking mind, astute and alert, aware. But don't run the engine on conceit, on pride, or self-overrating, or on the opposite extreme, servility, which drives people into taking on, adopting new traditions, new this, new that, new cultural values, thinking that that is the Dhamma. No, it is not. You don't need to learn another language to be practicing the Dhamma. Forget about that. That's silly to think about. To adopt external habits, cultural mores and things, those are not necessary at all. But that's what people have taken as, oh, I'm practicing the path. No, these are not requirements. The other things that I just mentioned are, however. And then you come across a statement made by, for example, Ajahn Mun, which is so grounded in reality. Or you come across a statement made by Webu Sayadaw or Shwe Wumin Sayadaw, and he's talking about Cittanupassana in such simple form. It's simple, simple, simple. And it's mind-blowingly beautiful. And you relax. You relax. And then you see how Bhante Nyanananda says how Nibbana is just a word. There's no separation that needs to be there, because otherwise it's just an identification that is taking place in the mind. You're rushing to get to a goal over there, away from you. So you slowly, slowly start to settle inward and become more comfortable with what is taking place now. And you approach it from that place of humility as you're still striving, keeping your awareness on the mind and what the mind is engaged in. You're observing the mind, observing everything. You do not need to be constantly noting in order for you to practice vipassana. No, not at all. You don't need that. When you're sitting, do you know that you are sitting? Are you receptive to all the signs and signals that are coming to you from the body? And that means you're connected to the body. Now, are you aware of the mind observing the body? That might take a few more seconds for some. But once you do, it becomes a habit. Now, everywhere you go, you're actually observing the mind, observing everything. You cannot be fooled anymore. You will be able to identify things. And then, every so often, you might choose to dive into a certain feeling, to probe its texture, its dimensions. But you do not get caught in that feeling, good, bad, or neutral, doesn't matter. Or physical experiences such as pain. You experience your lungs when they're hurting. When you're sneezing and it's a painful sneeze or a cough, you don't separate yourself from the body or try to wish for another rebirth or somewhere else where there are no coughs taking place at all. and you observe the coughing sensations that are happening. And then you observe the feeling of pain, unpleasant experiences. You observe that. And as you're doing this more and more, you're also observing the mind, observing all of this. Suddenly there's no identification. You're seeing Nama Rupa for what it is. So your body is the best teacher, ultimately. That is what Venerable Ananda said. When his friends died, when his teacher died, and he felt completely abandoned. But then, in the Theragatha, in his own verses, you see him say, well, wait a minute, then I saw the body, his body. That is the best teacher. To observe constantly. Venerable Anuruddha himself, when he was asked again and again by disciples and other bhikkhus, arahants even, as to what was his method, he always said, the body. Whether it was sitting, whether it was standing, whether it was walking, whether it was lying down, I was with it. Whatever experiences, good, bad, ugly, neutral, I stayed with it. And automatically you understand that how beautiful of a decision it was for you to walk away from home life into homelessness. How grand of a challenge that was, and you overcame that. You did that yourself. But that gives you courage to go ahead into every single experience that you have in the body while you're bringing sati, while you're applying vipassana. And then you start seeing the Dhamma is alive in you. There's no need for you to walk away from the robes. There's no need for you to give up simply because you see some teachers, individuals who carry themselves as teachers, but they're not living the Dhamma. That's none of your concern. These people were around even at the time of the Buddha. More than good teachers, more than good bhikkhus, there were bad bhikkhus at the time of the Buddha. That's just the law of averages, right? That's just normal. You're going to have a lot of chaff and very little wheat. So, but that should not discourage you to give up on this holy life, living this holy life perfectly, fully in the 21st century. So you can, with your efforts, make sure that there's one extra arahant, even in the 21st century, even in the West, or in the East, doesn't matter. In this world today, which is beautiful, because by becoming a noble disciple and then one who goes beyond the training, becoming an arahant, what is happening is you're elevating the whole entire cosmos. Every living being, every being rejoices in that reality. So there's no east, there's no west. There's just darkness that you have overcome. And now it's just beautiful brilliance. So let's all go in that direction. Sukhyoto.